Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Greetings. I'm Hugh Hewitt. It's Friday. It's Friday. It's Friday. Welcome to the weekend. It's still the weekend, even in this, the year of the plague. Even as we go over 85,000 American dead, we are still celebrating. We live in the country where you get to know the information, and you get to be able to be prepared and not be soldered into your apartments like in Wuhan. The Chinese government, I think, in the biggest story of the day, and I will be asking National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien about this next hour. He's going to be my guest. Is that, quote, China threatens sanctions on U.S. politicians for coronavirus criticism. That's right. Two United States senators, Tom Cotton and Josh Hawley, both heard here on this show. Two American representatives, Dan Crenshaw and Chris Smith of New Jersey, Crenshaw of Texas, Chris Smith of New Jersey, both got threatened by the CCP. Other people referenced Senators Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, Martha McSally of Arizona, Lance Gooden of Texas. Frankly, if I were the president, I would invite all these people over to the Rose Garden today and say, China, you don't get to tell us what to do unless President Obama's team comes back here. Then you can have your run of the White House again. That's what I would do. That's the biggest story of the day. I'll ask Robert O'Brien about that coming up. Let me do the biggest economic story of the day early. Normally I save this, brought to you by birchgold.com. I do a business story of the day every day, and this is a big story. And it's another reason why you will want, let me check the price of gold. This changes throughout the day. It fluctuates throughout the day. But as the morning unfolds in America, gold is at $1,742, up significantly from where it was on Monday. Overnight, Japan had a good night. England is in, markets will be open until well after this show is over, no matter when you hear it on podcast or whatever, if you're listening to it timely. Up overseas, Germany and England are both up significantly. I don't know what American markets do in the course of a day. I'm off the air everywhere by noon, and people listen to the podcast. Who knows? You got to check the market. It fluctuates. But what doesn't fluctuate is GDP, German growth. German GDP shrunk by 2.2% in the first quarter. This is the government that does everything, whose holy grail is economic growth. They don't ever let anything get between them and growing. It's their communist background. It's their bitter war history. It's just who they are. What a shock. Angela Merkel going out for last year, going out in style. And the German bank is turning out to be the German bank and bullying the EU. I have tweeted out a headline that they are clearly going to make everyone else in the European Union suffer to make Germany's landing as soft as possible. It's a good thing Boris Johnson got the United Kingdom out. It would be a good thing if you balanced your portfolio with some gold right away. The rest of the world is going to have a shaky 6 to 12 months. It'll be fine long term. I believe in the V-shaped recovery. The markets are coming back, but gold up to 1742. Send my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 474747. Would you please? 474747. And diversify. Birch Gold Group has thousands of satisfied customers, countless 5-star reviews, and they will help you roll over a portion of your IRA, or they will let you buy gold, whichever way. Go to hughgold.com. Let me also say I was very cheered yesterday. Well, a couple of things. I watched this great Bob Dylan. I didn't know Martin Scorsese did a movie about Bob Dylan, 15 years ago. So Dylan is at the top of his game. He's a little bit old now to be doing TV, but he looks, he's in his prime. He's in his early 60s, mid 60s, maybe late 60s when he does this retrospective. So he has a lot to reflect on. And it's No Direction Home is the name of it. And there are people like Liam Clancy in it that I've never heard. He said, remember, Bob, no fear, no envy, no meanness. That was Clancy, the great Irish tenor, talking to great Irish folk singer. I love that. No fear, no envy, no meanness. That should be that's the Hugh Hewitt show. That's my Twitter feed, by the way. And in that keeping, before I play you some Donald Trump on Fox Business yesterday, I got a note from a Supreme Court justice yesterday. Not one of the 9, but one of the 50 courts in the United States, sponsoring a kid to prison fellowship. I'm very, very deeply grateful for this. Very deeply grateful. It's very tough when you have a mom or dad in jail. Imagine you're a 16-year-old man in the Bed-Stuy neighborhood in Brooklyn. Now imagine your dad is in prison, and on the main streets, people judge you based on your looks.
I got stopped and fished by cops a couple of times, and like they think of just because of the way I dress, I'm a hood boy, or I'm in a gang, or I affiliate myself with gangs. But little do they know I take Brooklyn college classes. I have 40 credits as a junior. Like, I'm pretty good at school. Just because I dress, just because of the way I dress, they think that I'm a bad kid or something. It's not good to stereotype people.
And not good to stereotype people, especially people who are not responsible for their parents' actions. You don't visit the sin of the mom or the dad on the kid. And so Angel Tree Prison Fellowship tries to get them to camp. They always send thousands of kids to camp. Some of those camps will be open this summer, some won't. Angel Tree will not forget any of these kids. They've got relationships with them. Some will go to camp. Others will get a box of blessings. But it all depends on you calling 888-206-2764 or making a $200 donation to Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree right over at HughHewitt.com. Donald Trump on Fox Business with Maria Bartiromo yesterday. Maybe the president will give $200, or Maria Bartiromo will. He talked about the overwhelming need right now, and I agree with him on this. Cut number one.
So I want them to open when they can, when they want. The governors are opening them. Most of them are either opened or opening or considering it. I think that we have to get back to work. We have to get our country back. We have to take it back. It was artificially closed. I think we're doing incredibly well, considering the fact that we had the greatest economy, Maria, in history. You report it every morning. The greatest that anyone's ever seen, best job numbers, best stock market numbers, best everything. We had the best everything. And in addition to military being strong, all of the things we've done, and we had to just one day, boom, close it. We did the right thing, and now we got to get back. We got to bring our country back, and it's going to happen, and it's going to happen fast. I call it a transition to greatness. You're going to have the third quarter. People are starting to get into that right now, but it's going to be a transition. That's a transition quarter. We're going to do well in the fourth quarter, and I think next year, with all of the stimulus, all of the things we've done, I think we're going to have one of the best economic years we've ever had.
He's right. There's going to be some inflation, but I think he's right. He also laid out the Democrats' approaches. They politicized the pandemic for a reason. Cut number two.
Do you think your critics want you to keep it closed going into the election?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a political thing in addition. I think
because
some
they're
states,
saying you're putting money, business ahead of lives.
Yeah, no. I think the people that want to see the right thing happen, they agree with me. We have to get our country open. You know, if it was up to some people, let's keep it closed for a long time, okay? A long time, and watch the United States go down the tubes. Not going to happen. Never going to happen on my watch.
Not going to happen on his watch. Who's he running against? Maria Bartiromo asked. Cut number five.
I'm running against the Democrats, and I'm running against the media. I'm running against the radical left. I'm running against some really stupid Republicans that don't understand how good they had it, because we have some I'm at 95 or 96% with the Republican Party, but we have some people that claim to be Republicans, and they've gone crazy. And the reason is I've defeated them all. You know, they were all my opponents, and they've never gotten over it. Guys, Weaver and Schmidt, all losers. And they go out and they try buying commercials. And you say, gee, we've rebuilt our military. We've taken care of our vets. Our vets are in the best shape. You've never seen anything like it with the vets, you know, with choice, with everything else. We've done such a good job. And then you add the judges and you add protecting our Second Amendment. And what are these guys going to do? Support Joe Biden? And, because Joe has been brought way left, way left.
Way. When we come back, he's also, as the New York Times said, what did Joe know and when did, not the New York Times, the New York Post, I'm sorry. What did Joe know and when did he forget it? Okay, I'm coming right back. Robert O'Brien, National Security Advisor, China threatening our people. What's he going to say about that? Angel Tree needs your help. The banner is at HughHewitt.com. Don't forget as well, givingmasks.com. Look, everyone's going to be wearing a mask for 3 to 6 months. Get them from givingmask.com/Hugh. Feel good about the protection you provide yourself, because when you do that, they'll send masks to people who need them as well. Givingmasks.com/Hugh. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That's early Dylan. And it's from the movie. I listened to the first half. I watched the first half of No Direction Home, the Martin Scorsese epic from 15 years ago, I think. And what's the whole story in the middle of this thing of Joni Baez telling why Bob Dylan wrote that song is worth the entire effort to watch the movie. Sonny Bunch coming up at the bottom of the hour. I'll ask him about this. No Direction Home. I recommend it highly. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt has got a new Julian Peoples thing that she wants to watch, right? So it's going to be a struggle for. It starts at the Battle of Waterloo, so she's trying to trick me into watching it, but I don't think I'll fall for this. So Donald Trump and Joe Biden. All right, this is the president yesterday on Fox Business, and then I'm going to play you a couple of clips from Joe Biden yesterday town hall. Here's the president first on Fox Business, cut number 8.
It's never going to happen. We'll keep our vice president very healthy, and I'll stay healthy. Never going to happen. She would be a disaster. Look, Nancy Pelosi's a disaster, okay? Even doing a thing like that with her crazy, but what she wants to do is get involved with the voting. She just got back to Washington. Everyone said, what was so long? She just got back here. So let's just see how it all works out. But I think we're going to have a great election. I'm getting really good poll numbers. For the most part, they're not being shown. And I saw Joe Biden on television yesterday. And if you watch him, he knows nothing. He knows absolutely nothing.
Do you think he will be the candidate?
I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, I'm looking. Normally, it's, of course, he's going to be the candidate. Again, if Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, as I affectionately call her, because her whole life was a fraud, if Elizabeth Warren just got out before Super Tuesday, it would be Bernie. I don't care who it is. It doesn't matter. I actually would prefer Joe. I think I'd prefer Joe. Who knows, right, about those things?
Who knows? But here's what he's talking about. Joe Biden at the town hall yesterday, cut number 17.
This is not a moment for excuses or deflections or blame game. We're in the middle of a pandemic that had cost us more than 85,000 jobs as of today. Lives of millions of people, millions of jobs.
85,000 jobs, millions of people. Oops, got that one a little backwards. So he talks about those doctors that he's meeting with every day. Cut number 18.
I'm not, and I have a like all of you, but every day I have between an hour and a half brief with the former head of our former Surgeon General. Anyway, with docs across the country.
The Surgeon General that you can't remember, who you meet with an hour and a half a day. That one. Now, I have to talk to Dwayne an hour and a half a day, and I couldn't get Dwayne out of my head if I wanted to. He lives there, rent-free. But honestly, he meets with him an hour and a half a day, can't remember his name. I'm telling you, I don't think he's going to be the nominee. I just do not think he's going to be the nominee. Let me end this segment on a high note. I mentioned givingmasks.com/Hugh. You're going to need masks. Everyone's going to wear them for 3 to 6 months as we transition in, as the therapies become wider spread, as the recovery and the incident and prevalence data is out there, as the CDC gets better, as more people go back to restaurants, as restaurants are staffed by young people and are generally patronized by young people, and older people are generally going to stay home, though not exclusively. Some of us are, doing 6 miles after the show every day. We'll feel a little bit better about going in. But we're all going to be wearing masks. Get yours from givingmask.com/Hugh. For every order you make, they donate a mask to one of my favorite hospitals. And so please, I direct that flow, but you make it possible for some not-for-profit. You got to get masks anyway. Go to givingmasks.com/Hugh. They send hospital certified equipment to hospitals. You just need a lesser kind, not as expensive. Go to givingmasks.com/Hugh and do it today. Sonny Bunch is next. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. The shot heard around the entertainment world this week is that Hamilton, the much anticipated movie, will be dropping on Disney Plus at home on July 3rd. It's going to run on a nonstop loop at Fetching Mrs. Hewitt's screen. I'm not sure about Sonny Bunch. He doesn't like music docs. He doesn't like musicals. He's kind of grumpy. What do you think, Sonny?
I would say that it's a pretty interesting move by Disney here. You know, Disney paid $75 million for this movie. It's a completed filmed version of the stage play, right? It's not an adaptation. They just filmed the stage play. And they paid $75 million for this. They were going to bust it out a year from now. This was supposed to come out in 2021. And they've moved it up to 2020, and they're going to put it out on Disney Plus. And this has all sorts of kind of, you know, industry implications. There's lots of tea leaf reading about it, but the simple fact of the matter is that Disney does not actually have a ton of stuff for Disney Plus, aside from the massive Disney Vault, right? They just don't have a ton of new stuff. They had The Mandalorian, and that was great, did very well, but is obviously long done now. And so they need some original content and original programming to continue juicing the numbers, which have been very good. I mean, the Disney Plus was projected, you know, Bob Iger, he may have been lowballing it, but he said it would take 5 years to get to 50 million users, and they got there in like 6 months. So
yeah, that vault's got the Scarecrow of Romney Marsh, Swamp Fox, Davy Crockett. That vault's got everything for kids in America that parents can just turn on and leave on during the quarantine.
Yeah, I mean the thing about the vault is that it is very, very deep, and it has, you know, stuff not only from recent memory but also from way back in the past. So like anyone who has some nostalgia for old Disney stuff can go check that out. I mean, I'd be curious to know what the actual numbers look like. They obviously don't release anything, but I would be really curious to know what everyone actually watches. If it's, you know, people watching like The Lion King, or if it's people watching Davy Crockett or whatever. I'd be very, very interested to know that.
I do know though that Hamilton, my daughter, my wife are addicted. If fentanyl took on a musical form, it would be Hamilton. And not that it kills you, though it does drive the people with you insane. It's going to generate a lot of subscriptions, Sonny Bunch. This is a very smart move.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always kind of curious about this because I hated the Hamilton boom that we lived through a couple of years ago, right? Where everybody was talking all the time about Hamilton. It was Hamilton, Hamilton, Hamilton. Oh, have you seen the cast recording? Have you gone to see it on Broadway with the original cast? Oh no, well it's not as good. It does nothing for me because I really hate musical theater. I hate musical theater, Hugh. It's not so much that I don't like Hamilton. It's that I don't like any musical theater.
You know, Sonny, you and Generalissimo, you and Radio Blogger need to go off and have a therapy session together because something happened to you when you were kids, and you have the same view. Like you probably don't like Camelot either, and I mean, there's something wrong here.
None of these work for me, and I've been to ones that should work for me. For instance, the Book of Mormon, which I'm a huge South Park fan. I love the guys who made the Book of Mormon, and I went to go see that, and I was like, no, this isn't that funny. I don't like the singing. I don't like the dancing. This is all very annoying to me. I just want to watch it.
Let me probe this because yesterday I was watching No Direction Home, only 15 years after it came out. I didn't know Martin Scorsese had done a 3.5-hour movie on Bob Dylan. Of course, I love Dylan, so I love this thing. There's one clip in there, by the way. It's Johnny Cash singing at the Newport Beach Film Festival. Listen to this for a second. This is 1963. He's not wearing black. That's what people need to know. He didn't. Have you watched this film, No Direction Home?
I mean, I watched it back in 2005 when it was on PBS. So I've seen it. It's been a while. You know, there's a more recent Martin Scorsese documentary about
Yeah,
Bob Dylan.
on Rolling Thunder Review, which I actually saw when I was in college, and it's a great movie, but it's not as good as this one. Do you watch musical docs either, like the Crosby movie that came out, or Echoes in the Canyon, that sort of stuff?
I watch very, very few of them. The only one I really, really like is another Martin Scorsese one, actually, the one on the band, The Last Waltz.
Oh, that's a great movie.
Yeah. Yeah, no, but again, I am not a big music guy, Hugh. This is the thing, is that I'm not a big music listener. So when the documentaries about the musicians happen, it has to be real interesting and real well done. And Scorsese's made a bunch of them. I remember, God, what was it? The Rolling Stones one that he made a few years back was pretty good.
Well, the reason I like Dylan is he's a Nobel laureate. So, in 100 years, people say, why is he a Nobel laureate? And I'll watch this. I did watch Extraction on your advice. So I'm looking for another, and I liked it, by the way. I thought it was everything one expects out of that movie. An impossible number of headshots by one man who gets a couple of scrapes.
Oh, sure. Shine a Light was the name of the Martin Scorsese Rolling Stones documentary. But Extraction's pretty good. It's fine. It's okay. It's totally okay. I don't think it's high cinema or anything, but It's on Netflix and people seem to enjoy it. So,
do you have anything else for us?
Boy, man, it's really a wasteland out there right now. Let me tell you. So
if you bring up Trolls World Tour, I'm cutting you off.
The last two movies that I've seen that were new, both are out on VOD now. The first is Arkansas, starring Vince Vaughn and Liam Hemsworth, the lesser Hemsworth. Chris Hemsworth is in Extraction.
Yes.
Liam Hemsworth, the lesser Hemsworth.
Hemsworth, the lesser.
And this is a kind of southern noir crime drama, kind of in the vein of an Elmore Leonard type book or novel or movie. It stars Liam Hemsworth and Clark Duke. They're playing two low-level drug dealers who are trying to figure out what the deal is with their mysterious boss. His name is Frog, and they don't know who he is. They have no idea who this Frog guy is. Well, it's Vince Vaughn. And the way the movie is structured is pretty interesting. It's basically telling two parallel stories. The first is about the rise of these two young drug dealers as bigwigs in the Dixie Mafia, and then the other one goes back in time and it follows Vince Vaughn's rise as Frog through the ranks and his creation of his little drug empire.
Is it worth watching?
I liked it a fair amount. I have talked to many people who haven't, so I am possibly not the person to ask on this. I liked it. I did like it. I think it's interesting and it's good. And what's interesting about it, beyond Vince Vaughn, who's just amazing in this, and John Malkovich is also in it. He's very good. He's got a bit part.
Sold.
Great. He's very good in it. I do know some people find it a little bit boring and a little bit, kind of meandering and don't quite see the point of it. But that, to me, almost is the point of it. This is very much a movie about the way people fall into things. It's a movie about, the kind of accidental course one's life can take to. It's
a sort of Breaking Bad 2.0.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, Breaking Bad.
I never saw it. I won't watch a movie about a teacher who becomes a meth dealer, so I've never watched it.
Breaking Bad is good. You should watch it. I think you'd like it. But this is kind of like that. Not quite the same thing, but I can see the comparison there. But yeah, I liked it. I know a lot of people who didn't. So if you're not in the mood for something that's very much a character based, 2 hour, slightly meandering sort of thing, maybe this isn't for you.
Have you heard about this new Julian Fellows thing that the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt is going to oblige me to watch? It starts at Waterloo. Belgravia.
Oh, what is this?
Oh, it's a nightmare. No. It's a nightmare for men is what it is. It's a nightmare.
Sounds awful, Hugh.
It does.
That sounds awful.
Don't let Mrs. Bunch know about it.
I can't save you from that. I'm
All
sorry.
right, Belgravia, you've been warned. All right, what's
Yeah.
else? What else is on your list?
And the other movie that is out that is a strong avoid. This is me telling you to avoid something. A movie called Capone, starring Tom Hardy.
Oh, now I understand your tweet. Okay.
Yeah, it's a movie starring Tom Hardy as Al Capone, and it is about the last year of Al Capone's life. Capone, of course, he died relatively young in his mid-40s of syphilis, more or less. He had syphilis from the age of 15, and it drove him bonkers. And this movie is about, basically a bad person with syphilitic dementia having a very rough go of it.
Did you enjoy Boardwalk Empire?
I liked Boardwalk Empire a lot. I thought Boardwalk Empire was great.
So did I. So you can't
Empire.
really improve on that Capone.
Yeah, that was a good Capone. That was a very good Capone. That guy who was also in The Irishman and Snatch. I like that actor a lot. But this Capone is very bad. Tom Hardy is doing one of his very indecipherable accents. Tom Hardy loves doing accents. He's a big fan of wearing masks and doing accents. But in this movie, the accent is very, very bad. I could barely understand him. I would say a full third of the time he's on the screen. It just sounds like he's going.
Yeah, sorry. I got a quick exit question. I am watching No Direction Home with subtitles so that I can get the lyrics and some of the accents of some of the foreign performers. Do you find yourself doing that, or you just put up with the accents you can't decipher?
I just put up with the accents for the most part. I just put up with the accents. It's easier that way.
When I watched the one about Peaky Blinders without subtitles, it would have been completely not possible. Sonny Bunch, Rebeller Media, is it prospering in these times? Is the Bunch clan well? Is everything going okay?
Yeah, we're doing fine. We're out here in Texas. Things are loosening up a bit. We're out to restaurants and such. So
you shooting glass bottles off of a fence or anything like that?
No, we don't have a fence here, but we are excited to get everything rolling again. I'm excited to get to theaters once they reopen. Tenet, that's what we got to keep our eyes on.
And pretty soon we're going to have the Sonny Bunch podcast. I think that's rolling along. We'll tell people about that next week. Sonny Bunch, follow him on Twitter. Go to rebellermedia.com. Thank you, Mr. Bunch. Time for. You got it. ReliefFactor.com. Open the bag. Take out the pack. Opens very easily. 4 pills. Lukewarm coffee. Mr. Friday. Ah, wonderful. Now, the trouble is, it's going to rain like Noah's Ark in Virginia for the next 6 days. And I do not believe in running in the rain. That is a young man's game with the wet feet and the soggy socks and the blisters that come with it. Nope. I'm going to sit around and watch musical docs and evidently Belgravia. But I'll feel better in my chair because I took my ReliefFactor.com, as you would if you did. And you'll also feel like Honor Bound Coffee helps you support military families. So go both to ReliefFactor.com and HonorBoundCoffee.com today, this weekend. Come right back on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Joined now by the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe, in quarantine somewhere in Tarzana.
Correct, but don't let anybody know. Hugh, I had never read the actual text of the Bill of Rights, and I thought it might be a good idea to revisit it. To prevent all misconstruction, to restrict abuse of powers, a list of rights was drafted, not the government's, but ours. They knew a tyrant's edicts could be erring and vindictive, and so they crafted clauses both instructive and restrictive. The brand new Constitution, after vigorous debates, saw significant improvement as amended by the states. The first of these, adopted by the wise but infant nation, made it clear the people valued freedom as foundation. Freedom to assemble, free to pray, and of the press, when beset by grievances to seek for their redress. No mere words on paper, but provisions fundamental, as our impetus to greatness, absolutely instrumental. But my freedom to assemble is aggressively curtailed, and when I speak what's on my mind, I'm piously assailed. I'm piling up my grievances as fast as I can make them, but thanks to those in government, I have nowhere to take them. The press was deemed essential, but much to my frustration, no one is reporting. They're just taking dictation. I cannot go to worship. The governors have spoken, and I know I shouldn't break the law, but the law's already broken. That's If It Ain't Broke, But It Is, by Tarzana Joe.
Joe, that's a glorious song of freedom to the Bill of Rights there. There's a Bill of Rights Day. I think it's in September. We got to dust that off come the appropriate time.
And when you get that in your con law class, if a class ever meets again,
eventually we will, and eventually I will use it. Thank you, my friend. Tarzana Joe at Reagan.com. Are those commissions continuing to pile up in your inbox?
They're continuing to trickle in. I've got some marriages that are actually happening.
I was going to say, you're a wedding guy now. What is that, 50% of your business is wedding poems?
I would say yes.
And there are no weddings.
Well, like I said, I have one at the end of the month in Colorado, and I'm working extra hard on it. So
well, there you go. Now is the time to get real beauty from Joe, and at a bargain. Tarzana Joe at Reagan.com for all your poetry needs. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to talk to Joe. Let me also tell you, as I get ready for Robert C. O'Brien, the National Security Advisor, I want you to know what he wrote yesterday, so I don't have to spend time telling you about it. He comes up at the start of the next hour. He wrote a piece on ventilators. You say, why did he write a piece about ventilators? Because America is doing a heck of a thing on ventilators. It's at Fox News. Ventilators for coronavirus. U.S. is the arsenal of health in war on COVID-19. Ventilators are life-saving tools in the fight against COVID-19, O'Brien writes. This is at Fox News yesterday. It comes up on a Google alert. They are durable medical devices intended to control or assist a critically ill patient's breathing by mechanically delivering them a predetermined percentage of oxygen. Ventilators can be reused, but hospitals need a sufficient supply to treat critically ill patients, while still allowing enough time for each ventilator to be refurbished between patients. At the early stages of the United States response to the pandemic, many models predicted that the supply of ventilators in hospitals across the country would not meet the demand of critically ill patients. According to the models, a shortage of ventilators in America threatened to be a public health catastrophe. To address this threat, President Trump took decisive action to meet the anticipated demand for ventilators, and in the process organized an industrial ramp-up, the likes of which we have not seen since World War II. Using the Defense Production Act, the president encouraged private sector companies such as GM, Ford, others to get in the ventilator production business. Other ventilator companies like General Electric, Vyaire Medical, Zoll Medical Group, others expanded their production. Leading this effort, Jared Kushner, Senior Advisor Adam Bowler, CEO of U.S. International Development Finance Corp., Peter Navarro, Director of the White House Office of Trade and Manufacturing Policy. Despite irresponsible reporting to the contrary, the mechanisms to deliver the ventilators were so successful that every single patient who needed one got one. We're going to produce 100,000 of them by the end of July. The swift ramp-up allows President Trump now to become a provider of ventilators to Brazil, Bolivia, Ecuador, France, India, Indonesia, Italy, Kenya, Pakistan, Paraguay, Philippines, South Korea, South Africa, Spain, the United Kingdom, and many more. The president has ensured these nations can purchase this. He's already committed to providing 14,000 high-quality ventilators around the world. So I got a lot of questions for O'Brien about this. Number one, we're not going to need them. Number two, what's China doing? Because they're trying to blackmail people with their health supplies. Number three, what's he think about China trying to threaten our legislators? O'Brien is coming up, the National Security Advisor. Because if you listen to the Hugh Hewitt show, it'll be the Attorney General, will be the Vice President, will be the Senate Majority Leader. It'll be Kevin McCarthy, the leader of the GOP House. Whoever it is, if you want news, you tune her. This is where the news happens. We don't just talk about the news. We make the news at the Hugh Hewitt show. But let me encourage you as well during the break. Go to givingmasks.com. Pretty soon it's going to reopen. That means the run on masks is going to be huge. Get yours now. If you go to givingmasks.com/Hugh, not only will you get great masks at the best price, high quality, all the standards are met, third-party inspection, but they'll donate masks to a hospital I designate if you go to givingmasks.com/Hugh to order your mask. And so I really encourage you to do that. I'm also wearing my circle ring. People are asking me about it. You got to go to bodymetrics.com. I'll tell you about this next hour. It's a wonderful device. Body with an I, metrics.
He'll be here in a second.
Morning, Glory America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt on May 15th, Friday. As promised, the National Security Advisor to President Trump, the Ambassador Robert C. O'Brien, joins me. I always disclose he's an old friend, former law partner. Good morning, Robert. How are you?
I'm doing well, Hugh. How are you this morning?
Good. My first question, I get my Google alerts, my Robert O'Brien alerts, and up pops one yesterday. You've written something, a very important story, which I read last hour for the audience on ventilators. It's on Fox News. Why is this not in the New York Times?
Well, look, first of all, I want to say I couldn't be more pleased to have been published by Fox News. I've written for them for many, many years, and always honored when they publish something. I'm not sure why the mainstream press is not interested in good news or accomplishments of the administration of fighting the virus. And perhaps for the Times or New York Times, LA Times, that sort of thing. But couldn't be more pleased to have Fox's viewers and readers see the piece.
I am too, but I'm curious. Did you offer it to the New York Times?
I don't want to get into it, but the Times, New York Times, LA Times had a chance to run the piece, and I don't think it fit with their narrative of how the administration's responding to the virus, which has been really outstanding, and so I think they took a pass on it.
It doesn't fit their narrative, and I'm going to come back to that in a bit. I just read a story about Ivanka Trump and the Farmers to Families food box program. That won't fit their narrative either. I'll bet you anything you will not see this $1.2 billion program that buys food from farmers, gives it to distribution centers to pack and give to people in need. You will not see that, Robert O'Brien, just like the ventilators story. And I think our media is broken. Before we go to the ventilator story, do you agree with me?
Look, I think there's some problems there. And let me just give a huge shout out to Ivanka Trump and to her husband, Jared Trump. They're both senior advisors to the president. Since the outset of this crisis, they've rolled up their sleeves, dug in with a number of hundreds of thousands of other people in the government to respond to this crisis. And Jared with the ventilators, Ivanka with the food banks, and making sure that both our farmers are protected during the crisis as well as the consumers who need to get their food. It's been pretty astounding to watch how both of them have responded to the crisis. I'm proud to be their colleague.
It does distress me. When Mrs. Obama did things for military families, I was always the first to applaud her. I don't know what's happened to our media. It is completely infected with TDS. And so a ventilator story like this one, or the farmers to the box program that Ivanka is running, it just makes me distressed that our media is broken. Let's talk about ventilators. Apparently, I read your article on air last hour. We're going to have 100,000 plus ventilators by the end of July. I thought we were going to run out of these.
Well, early reports, and you'll remember even WebMD back in early March, the experts on WebMD and all the networks were reporting that there would not be enough ventilators for COVID patients in America that would need them. It was a crisis. There was no way to produce the ventilators fast enough. And we had a great team, Adam Bowler, Peter Navarro, Jared Kushner, who I mentioned earlier, and many others got together with industry. And we started producing ventilators the same way we produced fighter planes at the outset of World War II. We've got a number of great companies, and we're going to have over 50,000 in the U.S. stockpile. In fact, we have so many ventilators now we're able to turn to our partners and friends around the world who are desperate for them and supply ventilators to other countries that require them.
Now, you mentioned, I've known Navarro forever. We've been sparking it up for 30 years. We go to Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young concerts together, and we yell at each other. So I know him. I've met Jared once. I don't know who Adam Bowler is. I have no idea who that is. I've never heard, by the way, of Vire Medical or Zoll Medical. Of course, I know what GM and Ford are. This is quite the elaborate effort.
It's been a great effort. Adam Bowler is the head of what used to be called OPIC. It's the Development Finance Corporation. We finance projects around the world using taxpayer dollars to encourage American businesses to invest in in countries where there are great projects for American businesses and where we can compete against the Chinese and others. And Adam came over to the White House on leave from the agency he chaired to work on the ventilator project. It's been fantastic. And all these companies have been great. Medtronic, Hamilton, GE, Zoll, Bayer, GM, which started from scratch with a partner. We really put the American industrial base and American innovation to work. I even want to make a shout out to the scientists at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, out in California. They figured out how to manufacture a low-cost ventilator for $3,000 or $4,000 and put it on their web page and allows folks to use the design royalty-free in developing countries to build ventilators quickly and safely. So there's just a bunch of American innovation that's taken place in this project, and I'm sure proud of all the folks involved.
You hint in this piece that you're in the room where it happens, as they say in the Hamilton music, when the president is talking to foreign leaders, and you mentioned Brazil, Bolivia, Ecuador, France, India, Indonesia, Italy, Kenya, Pakistan, Paraguay. Do they ask for ventilators?
They do. We've had heads of state, once the word got out that the U.S. might be able to help provide ventilators, we've had heads of state from 5 continents reach out to us, Latin America, Central America, Mexico, Canada, our allies in Europe, all throughout Africa, Asia. And these machines are life-saving, and many of these other countries did not have the ability to do what we did to ramp up manufacturing. And so we've committed, the president is committed to our friends and partners and even folks that aren't necessarily partners around the world. Over 15,000 ventilators I think we've shipped or will ship by the end of May, over 6,000 ventilators. And it's and the great thing, Hugh, about the United States, we don't ask for anything in return like China does, or there's no attempt to bully these countries. The American people, out of their own generosity for countries that can't afford to order them, donate them through USAID, and for the countries that can afford them, we allocate them to let the manufacturers know that they can ship these ventilators overseas. It's really a wonderful project.
I want to come back to that in a second. You mentioned China bullying people. They're trying to bully us. They're trying to bully Senator Cotton, Senator Hawley, Congressman Crenshaw, Congressman Chris Smith. They've gone after Martha McSally and Marsha Blackburn, some state AGs. What's the response of the United States to the Chinese Communist Party telling us that they're going to sanction our freely elected legislators and attorney generals?
Well, look, I don't think that Josh Hawley or Tom Cotton were great senators, or Dan Crenshaw as a friend. I don't think they were planning on vacation in Wuhan anytime soon. So I think the impact of those sanctions are zero. But it does show the way that China is attempting to bully not just smaller countries, which is well known, but even the United States. The United States doesn't take well to that sort of diplomacy. That won't go over well for the Chinese. And as far as the courageous politicians involved that are standing up to China, they're going to have the support and the admiration and the love of their fellow citizens. There's no question about it.
Now, the media likes to present President Trump as not great at diplomacy. You're in the room when he talks to these leaders. How do these conversations go?
Hey, I wish, and I've said this before on TV, I wish that every American could see their president speaking with these foreign leaders. He's incredibly gracious with them. He has a great rapport. President Trump, there's no question about it, is the best diplomatic tool we have in the country, and for those who've seen the back and forth with what the president calls the fake news and press conferences and that sort of thing, you got to see the side of the president talking to his foreign leaders. He encourages them, he gives them advice, he listens to them and their stories and what's happening in their countries, their successes and failures. With some of the younger foreign leaders, he mentors them. He's always telling countries, whether it's South Africa or Paraguay or even some countries that might be adversaries, how much the U.S. supports them, how much the American people love them and want their people to get through this COVID virus. Almost uniformly, I think we've had either 45 or 50 calls, most of those with the president, but in some cases, because there have been so many, he's delegated them to me to speak with the prime ministers or presidents. But in almost every case, the countries have expressed dismay at how China handled this, how the World Health Organization handled this virus outbreak. We've talked about how we've had 5 plagues come out of China over the past 20 years with not just COVID, which has just wrecked the world economy, but SARS, bird flu, avian flu, H1N1, MERS probably came from China. It's though the whole world is waking up to the fact that we've had just plague after plague come after China, that China has a massive public health problem and needs help from the world to solve it. But we just can't have these viruses and plagues coming out of China any longer.
Last question, if Taiwan, the freely governed island of Taiwan, if they need ventilators, will we send them to Taiwan even though it will tick off the CCP?
Absolutely. And by the way, Taiwan from the outset of this crisis has been great to the United States and has sent us hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of masks for our hospital workers and citizens. And Taiwan's a great friend. If they need ventilators, they'll have them. No question about it.
National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, thanks for the time this morning, and thanks for the update on this. I cannot believe the New York Times did not run this piece, but I'm glad that Fox News did. Thank you. Be well.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group. So you're doing what with this again? Okay. They thought you meant next hour, and I didn't know how that was going to work with... Got it.
Glory America, bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt on May 15th, Friday, as promised. Canada, it's Hugh Hewitt on May 15th, Friday, as promised. God's on my side, America. Good morning. I'm Hugh Hewitt. God's on my side because I encourage you to become a supporter of Angel Tree's Prison Fellowship program that gets the children of prisoners to summer camp where it's possible this summer. Normally, we send thousands of kids to camp. It may be less this year. We don't really know yet because hopefully we're going to get guidance that you get young counselors and young kids and they're going to be safe at camp. But if they can't go to camp, we'll send them a box of blessings at $200. But we do need $200 per camper. And I appreciated so much getting a note yesterday from one of the Supreme Court justices of the states in the United States, just sending, hey, that prison fellowship, this individual knows what it's like for a child. They've had to review sentences their whole life. They know what it means, 10 to 20 for armed robbery or something, what it means to the children. Prison Fellowship steps in, Angel Tree steps in, they take care of these kids, and you can help a kid this summer. $200 donation to Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree. Please call 888-206-2764, 888-206-2764, or go to HughHewitt.com and click on the Angel Tree banner. Now, those of you who are watching on my YouTube channel, and you can sign up for that over at Hugh Hewitt at YouTube, you see this thing I'm wearing. And I left it on today. I'm up earlier than most of you people. Some of you are just getting up right now. And I did it to remind myself to tell you, I think this is terrific. Bodymetrics.com, B-O-D-I, metrics. It's misspelled, so the Steelers fans are going to get there easily. Bodymetrics with an I, not a Y. Bodymetrics.com. It's $300. It's not cheap. What does it tell you? It tells you your SpO2, all right, the oxygen level that you've got. It tells you other stuff like how much deep sleep you get, how much light sleep you get, how many REM minutes you get, how much are you awake during the night. But mostly, its great value is oxygen level because it will tell you how many ODIs you have. And an ODI is an oxygen desaturation index. An ODI event, everyone snores or misses a beat or something like that. If you've got less than 10 of those per night, you're in the normal range. And if you've got more than 10, you're in the mild range. You might start thinking about seeing a doctor about sleep apnea. And if you got greater than 30, you're in danger, right? You're going to have to get some breathing help. Luckily, I sleep like a log and it shows it every that. But now we also know this is not a diagnostic tool, right? It's an observational tool. It tells you how much oxygen you've got in your blood. You know what the earliest sign for some people is of the virus? Low levels of oxygen in your blood. So you're going to see a lot of these things at a lot of hospitals. So people ask me about them. I love Body Metrics. Use my name when you get it. I think you get 10% off or something like that. But even if you forget my name, go to Body Metric. If you are one of those people who are struggling and you're watching your oxygen, you're not virus afflicted. You're just struggling with, what do they call it? CPOD, emphysema. If you're someone who's got an oxygen-related disorder, this is for you. Good observational tool. It's like a blood sugar tool, except it doesn't do blood sugar. Let me also tell you about, since I'm talking about virus stuff, I'm going to replay the O'Brien interview at the bottom of the hour. Givingmasks.com/Hugh. I ordered a whole bunch of masks for the whole family. Because I know givingmask.com has the quality standards. There are some out there that are coming from China that are not worth the cotton in which you're getting. They're just not third-party certified. Not true. Givingmask.com meets every standard you want, Matt. If you put my name at the end of it /Hugh, givingmask.com/Hugh, they will also donate one of the highest end masks, very expensive masks, to the hospital of my choice. And I'm working it out where to go with that because you got to have a very special mask to get to a hospital, but that's not what you need to wear when you go into a restaurant as we reopen the country. And we are reopening the country. And we're reopening the world. That's why if you look overseas, I never talk about American markets. I just want to encourage you. We're coming back. Germany, England, the markets today are good. We're coming back. They know that. China may not be coming back because everybody in the world is mad at China, as you'll hear when I talk with Robert O'Brien after the break. If you missed it or you missed the beginning of it, I'm replaying it for you because it makes news, and news happens here on the Hugh Hewitt Show. O'Brien joins me. I always disclose he's an old friend, former law partner. Good morning, Robert. How are you?
I'm doing well, Hugh. How are you this morning?
Good. My first question, I get my Google alerts, my Robert O'Brien alerts, and up pops one yesterday. You've written something, a very important story, which I read last hour for the audience on ventilators. It's on Fox News. Why is this not in the New York Times?
Well, look, first of all, I want to say I couldn't be more pleased to have been published by Fox News. I've written for them for many, many years, and always honored when they publish something. I'm not sure why the mainstream press is not interested in good news or accomplishments of the administration of fighting the virus. And perhaps for the Times or New York Times, LA Times, that sort of thing. But couldn't be more pleased to have have Fox's viewers and readers see the piece.
I am too, but I'm curious. Did you offer it to the New York Times?
I don't want to get into it, but the Times, New York Times, LA Times had a chance to run the piece, and I don't think it fit with their narrative of how the administration's responding to the virus, which has been really outstanding, and so I think they took a pass on it.
It doesn't fit their narrative, and I'm going to come back to that in a bit. I just read a story about Ivanka Trump and the Farmers to Families food box program. That won't fit their narrative either. I'll bet you anything you will not see this $1.2 billion program that buys food from farmers, gives it to distribution centers to pack and give to people in need. You will not see that, Robert O'Brien, just like the ventilators story. And I think our media is broken. Before we go to the ventilator story, do you agree with me?
Look, I think there are some problems there. And let me just give a huge shout out to Ivanka Trump and to her husband, Jared Trump. They're both senior advisors to the president. Since the outset of this crisis, they've rolled up their sleeves, dug in with a number of, hundreds of thousands of other people in the government to respond to this crisis. And Jared with the ventilators, Ivanka with the food banks and making sure that both our farmers are protected during the crisis, as well as the consumers who need to get their food. It's been pretty astounding to watch how both of them have responded to the crisis. I'm proud to be their colleague.
It does distress me. When Mrs. Obama did things for military families, I was always the first to applaud her. I don't know what's happened to our media. It is completely infected with TDS. And so a ventilator story like this one, or the farmers to the box program that Ivanka is running, it just makes me distressed that our media is broken. Let's talk about ventilators. Apparently, I read your article on air last hour. We're going to have 100,000 plus ventilators by the end of July. I thought we were going to run out of these.
Well, early reports, and you'll remember even WebMD back in early March, the experts on WebMD and all the networks were reporting that there would not be enough ventilators for COVID patients in America that would need them. It was a crisis. There was no way to produce the ventilators fast enough. And we had a great team, Adam Bowler, Peter Navarro, Jared Kushner, who I mentioned earlier, and many others got together with industry. And we started producing ventilators the same way we produced fighter planes at the outset of World War II. We've got a number of great companies, and we're going to have over 50,000 in the U.S. stockpile. In fact, we have so many ventilators now we're able to turn to our partners and friends around the world who are desperate for them and supply ventilators to other countries that require them.
Now, you mentioned, I've known Navarro forever. We've been sparking it up for 30 years. We go to Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young concerts together, and we yell at each other. So I know him. I've met Jared once. I don't know who Adam Bowler is. I have no idea who that is. I've never heard, by the way, of Vire Medical or Zoll Medical. Of course, I know what GM and Ford are. This is quite the elaborate effort.
It's been a great effort. Adam Bowler is the head of what used to be called OPIC. It's the Development Finance Corporation. We finance projects around the world using taxpayer dollars to encourage American businesses to invest in countries where there are great projects for American businesses and where we can compete against the Chinese and others. And Adam came over to the White House on leave from the agency he chaired to work on the ventilator project. It's been fantastic. And all these companies have been great. Medtronic, Hamilton, GE, Zoll, Vire, GM, which started from scratch with a partner. We really put the American industrial base and American innovation to work. I even want to make a shout out to the scientists at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, JPL, out in California. They figured out how to manufacture a low-cost ventilator for $3,000 or $4,000 and put it on their web page and allows folks to use the design royalty free in developing countries to build ventilators quickly and safely. So there's just a bunch of American innovation that's taken place in this project, and I'm sure proud of all the folks involved.
You hint in this piece that you're in the room where it happens, as they say in the Hamilton music, when the president is talking to foreign leaders, and you mentioned Brazil, Bolivia, Ecuador, France, India, Indonesia, Italy, Kenya, Pakistan, Paraguay. Do they ask for ventilators?
They do. We've had heads of state, once the word got out that the U.S. might be able to help provide ventilators, we've had heads of state from 5 continents reach out to us. Latin America, Central America, Mexico, Canada, our allies in Europe, all throughout Africa, Asia, and these machines are life-saving, and many of these other countries did not have the ability to do what we did to ramp up manufacturing, and so we've committed. The president is committed to our friends and partners, and even folks that aren't necessarily partners around the world. Over 15,000 ventilators, I think we've shipped or will ship by the end of May. Over 6,000 ventilators, and it's and the great thing, Hugh, about the United States, we don't ask for anything in return like China does, or there's no attempt to bully these countries. The American people, out of their own generosity, for countries that can't afford to order them, donate them through USAID, and for the countries that can afford them, we allocate them to let the manufacturers know that they can ship these ventilators overseas. It's really a wonderful project.
I want to come back to that in a second. You mentioned China bullying people. They're trying to bully us. They're trying to bully Senator Cotton, Senator Hawley, Congressman Crenshaw, Congressman Chris Smith. They've gone after Martha McSally and Marsha Blackburn, some state AGs. What's the response of the United States to the Chinese Communist Party telling us that they're going to sanction our freely elected legislators and attorney generals?
Well, look, I don't think that Josh Hawley or Tom Cotton were great senators, or Dan Crenshaw as a friend. I don't think they were planning on vacation in Wuhan anytime soon. So I think the impact of those sanctions are zero. But it does show the way that China is attempting to bully not just smaller countries, which is well known, but even the United States. The United States doesn't take well to that sort of diplomacy. That won't go over well for the Chinese. And as far as the courageous politicians involved that are standing up to China, they're going to have the support and the admiration and the love of their fellow citizens. There's no question about it.
Now, the media likes to present President Trump as not great at diplomacy. You're in the room when he talks to these leaders. How did these conversations go?
I wish, and I've said this before on TV, I wish that every American could see their president speaking with these foreign leaders. He's incredibly gracious with them. He has a great rapport. President Trump, there's no question about it, is the best diplomatic tool we have in the country, and for those who've seen the back and forth with what the president calls the fake news and press conferences and that sort of thing, you got to see the side of the president talking to his foreign leaders. He encourages them, he gives them advice, he listens to them and their stories and what's happening in their countries, their successes and failures. With some of the younger foreign leaders, he mentors them. He's always telling countries, whether it's South Africa or Paraguay or even some countries that might be adversaries, how much the U.S. supports them, how much the American people love them and want their people to get through this COVID virus. Almost uniformly, I think we've had either 45 or 50 calls, most of those with the president, but in some cases, because there have been so many, he's delegated them to me to speak with the prime ministers or presidents. But in almost every case, the countries have expressed dismay at how China handled this, how the World Health Organization handled this virus outbreak. We've talked about how we've had 5 plagues come out of China over the past 20 years, with not just COVID, which has just wrecked the world economy, but SARS, bird flu, avian flu, H1N1, MERS probably came from China. It's the whole world is waking up to the fact that we've had just plague after plague come after China, and that China has a massive public health problem and needs help from the world to solve it. But we just can't have these viruses and plagues coming out of China any longer.
Last question, if Taiwan, the freely governed island of Taiwan, if they need ventilators, will we send them to Taiwan, even though it will tick off the CCP?
Absolutely. And by the way, Taiwan, from the outset of this crisis, has been great to the United States and has sent us hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of masks. for our hospital workers and citizens. And Taiwan's a great friend. If they need ventilators, they'll have them. No question about it.
National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, thanks for the time this morning, and thanks for the update on this. I cannot believe the New York Times did not run this piece, but I'm glad that Fox News did. Thank you. Be well. I also want to play something from Fox and Friends. Lindsey Graham yesterday about President Obama's team hating Michael Flynn. Cut number 14.
Well, number one, why are they asking to unmask the incoming national security advisor of the Trump administration? Why do you have the outgoing administration trying to follow conversations of the incoming administration? That is outrageous. General Flynn had every right to be talking with the Russians about policy differences they have with the Obama administration. He could talk to anybody he wanted to talk to about his new job. I guarantee you that every incoming administration during transition reaches out to foreign governments. I doubt that most outgoing administrations spy on them. So this is an outrage. It's at least unethical, and we're going to get to the bottom of it. They had no business listening to anything General Flynn was saying about Trump policy.
Right. I mean, I imagine Michael Flynn might have had a different conversation with Israel than maybe Susan Rice did, because they seem to be butting heads with Israel. Hey, keep your powder dry. It's going to be a lot different when you take over. Maybe Michael Flynn didn't realize there's nothing wrong with that. But Senator, you know the law. There was nothing wrong with them unmasking. So for people to say unmasking means up to something diabolical, you can't put those two together. Senator Grassley didn't.
Well, see, here's what I would say. You can request an unmasking of an American citizen who's on the other end of a conversation with a foreign agent, but you have to have a national security reason. Here's the concern, that if you don't have a national security reason, you're basically spying or eavesdropping on a political opponent. They hated Flynn. They wanted him to be fired before he ever got the job. Was this an effort to undermine Flynn, or was it really about our national security? I talk to foreign leaders all the time about my differences with Obama foreign policy. When President Trump wanted to withdraw from Syria, I got on the phone and talked about everybody in the Mideast. If I find out they're listening to my conversation and reporting back to the White House what I'm saying to foreign leaders, that violates separation of powers. This is a big
Lindsey Graham is onto it. This is a huge scandal. The unmasking scandal is not going away. It's not going away. Watch that space over the weekend. Watch this space every time at this part of the day. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. Even during the Hillsdale Dialogue next hour, I tell you about ReliefFactor.com. I should have told O'Brien about it. The National Security Advisor, Ambassador O'Brien, needs to get more exercise. I tell him that every weekend. I think he walks every morning, which is good. I do. I'm going to be out trundling afterwards because ReliefFactor.com. Doesn't matter. I got no disc left. Doesn't matter. I got a rotator cuff tear. Doesn't matter. You got to get out there. You can't use your excuses of non-immobilizing injuries. If you can move, you got to move. And ReliefFactor.com helps you do that. All right, natural supplements. Icarian Curcumin is Veritol and Omega. $19.95 gets you started with a 3-week trial pack. Get the trial pack at ReliefFactor.com. Come right back here on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by No Safe Spaces.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, Johnny Baez. From the Martin Scorsese documentary that I watched the first half of last night. The doggone thing is 3 hours. And it's called No Direction Home. And it's about Bob Dylan. So it's really, really a terrific documentary. And I enjoy it because, look, they're all lefties. I understand that. It does not bother me that they're all lefties. All right, it just does not bother me. Coming up after the break, Matt Spalding, Dean of Hillsdale's Washington, D.C. campus and of their graduate program in D.C., joins me. I want to read to you a column in the Washington Post. Now, I write for the Washington Post. I disclose I got a conflict of interest, right? But this is by Mark Thiessen, who is, the other conservative there. I guess Henry Olsen is a conservative too, but Mark has written a very important column. He does not pick the headline, right? So we don't pick our headlines, but I like this headline. Someone committed a crime in the Michael Flynn case. It wasn't him. Are you listening, Judge Sullivan? No, you don't care. You're violating the Constitution left, right, and center, and you're embarrassing the federal judiciary, but you don't care. And I'm going to talk about that with Matt Spalding next hour. But Mark Thiessen writes, let's be clear. A crime was committed in the Michael Flynn case. But the crime was committed not by the retired general, but by someone who leaked the classified details of his conversation with then Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. The Justice Department was correct to drop charges against Flynn for lying to the FBI about his communications with Kislyak. The case was reviewed by Jeff Jensen, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Missouri, with 2 decades of experience as a prosecutor and an FBI special agent, and the resulting 108-page motion to dismiss is a searing indictment of FBI misconduct. Apparently, Judge Sullivan doesn't read the papers that are submitted to him. The department found that there was no legal justification for the FBI to question Flynn in the first place because the interview was, quote, untethered to and unjustified by the FBI's counterintelligence investigation, quote, unquote, of Flynn. The FBI had decided to close that inquiry because of, quote, an absence of any derogatory information, close quote. That meant Flynn pleaded guilty to making false statements that were not, quote, material to any investigation. For Flynn to have committed a crime, his statement had to have been not simply false, but materially false with respect to a matter under investigation. In his plea, Flynn, quote, stipulated the essential element of materiality without being informed that the FBI had already cleared him in the underlying investigation. Thiessen continues, that fact alone is disgraceful. Even more outrageous is that the Bureau interrogated Flynn about communications the Justice Department say were, quote, entirely appropriate. He was the incoming National Security Advisor, and his request that Russia avoid escalating tensions in response to U.S. sanctions was consistent with him advocating for, not against, the interests of the United States. There is nothing in the calls to suggest that he was, quote, being directed and controlled by the Russian Federation, end quote. And the FBI did not need his recollections of the calls because it had word-for-word transcripts. It seems clear, writes Thiessen, that the purpose of the interview was to set up a perjury trap. The agents did not inform him that they did not inform the White House counsel before the interview. I will add this. They didn't inform Sally Yates, the Attorney General, acting attorney, but the Attorney General. They did an end run around everyone. Look, I can't improve on this. I was going to write something about this, but I can't improve on this. Mark Thiessen concludes, right? The crime of leaking details about Flynn and Kislyak's call could only have been committed by a small universe of people who had access to the unmasked intelligence on Flynn. We don't know whether it was someone on the list, by the way. The fact is for U.S. Attorney John Durham, who is investigating the origins of the Russian probe, to determine. But this much is certain. Obama administration officials leaked unmasked intelligence about Flynn to the press. The fact that those individuals have gone unpunished for 3 years while Flynn has endured legal hell is appalling. It is. It's a complete inverse pyramid of the way it's supposed to work. And Judge Sullivan or anyone in your chambers, you are an embarrassment to the country, to the Constitution, to the federal bench, and to the idea of due process, which extends back to the Magna Carta. I hope Media Matters is listening and puts this down word for word. Judge Sullivan is an embarrassment to the idea of due process. This should have been detected. You should have smelled this out years ago and you missed it. Now you're embarrassed. And instead of just admitting error, which sometimes judges make, you're holding the lieutenant general hostage to your vanity. Because that's what this is. This is just a hostage to your vanity thing, and everybody knows it, Jed Sullivan. Everybody knows it. Let the general go. You cannot win this. You cannot save your reputation. First rule of holes, stop digging Judge Sullivan. First rule of holes, stop digging. I'll be right back to talk about Judge Sullivan's digging with Matt Spalding. The Constitution's at issue here, not just General Flynn. The Constitution, this is an Article 3 usurpation of an Article 2 power. It is outrageous, and it's a violation of the due process rights of General Flynn. Doubly damned. I'll tell you about it in the next hour in the Hillsdale Dialogue. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree Summer Camps. Click on the banner at hughhewitt.com.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's May 15th in the year of the plague, 2020. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means it's time for the Hillsdale Dialogue. The last radio hour of every week on the Hugh Hewitt Show is devoted to important big issues. Some of them that go all the way back to Homer, and these dialogues began in 2013, and they've continued for 7 great years. Today's guest is Matthew Spalding, Vice President of Washington, D.C. Operations for Hillsdale College, Dean of the Van Andel Graduate School of Government. I will tell you that everything you want to know about Hillsdale is at hillsdale.edu, but if you want to follow Matt's merry band of Hillsdalians, you go to at Hillsdale in D.C. on Twitter. Good morning, Dean. Matt, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm doing well under the circumstances. You didn't play me some Hamilton music.
We're going. Are you excited that it's coming to Disney Plus on July 3rd? Are you one of those people?
I drove my family from Washington D.C. from Virginia to Chicago to see it.
That's not crazy at all, Matt. That's not nuts at all. I was talking with Sonny Bunch last hour. This is not our main subject, but I'll just bring it up since you prompted me, and we'll play all Hamilton music for you. Disney Plus announced they're going to air the recording they did of the original cast on July 3rd, and you have to subscribe to Disney Plus to be able to watch it. Are you going to subscribe to Disney Plus to be able to watch it endlessly like my wife and daughter will?
I don't know if I'll go that far, but I might be tempted. It's mighty fine. I was expecting to be disappointed, but I thought it was actually quite good.
Oh, I loved it. I love it. Yeah. I just think it's great, and it's historically accurate. My favorite, I like King George III, but my favorite is the room where it happens. But the room where it happens is the great deal, the great compromise that brought D.C. to the swamp, right? Would you explain to people what that was?
That's right. Well, the great deal was Alexander Hamilton was trying to get his economic plans passed, so to assume all the debts and to kind of get the economy going. And the Republicans, Madison, disagreed with this, and they were at odds. They had dinner, the three of them, Madison, Jefferson, and Hamilton, in which they cut a famous deal, which was if you put the U.S. Capitol in Virginia, which say the South, not in Philadelphia where the bank was, not in New York where the financiers were, but in the South, we will agree to all of your economic plans. So they cut a great deal behind closed doors over, I'm sure, many bottles of wine.
You know, Matt Spalding, I have said that we are at a moment not unlike that right now because phase 4 must happen because the states have these massive debts. And there is a Nancy Pelosi wing that says bail out the states. I mean, it's trillions of dollars they need. The Republicans have said one thing, tort reform, one thing. But they could act, right. The room where it happens is going to have a lot of things on the table, and it has to happen, right?
No, I think it does, although I increasingly worry about these kinds of deals happening. Think of all the great deals, the compromise of 1850, the compromise tariff that stopped the nullification crisis. A compromise is only possible if both parties think they can get something out of it and they can come to some sort of agreement, which means they've got to have above them some higher principle that they serve, saving the Union, for instance. And with things going on right now, I'm, sometimes doubtful that those kinds of agreements are possible. I think it's necessary. I think probably we'll have an agreement. But I'm wondering if somehow we are moving towards larger regime questions that prevent those types of great compromises to happen. But the reason Hamilton and Jefferson and Madison could come to agreement is they agreed on the principles of the revolution. Those were not in dispute. And since those were not in dispute, the economic question and where to put the capital question were negotiable.
Now, Matt, I believe it is fair to say that the number one demand of the left, of the Democrats right now, is that they must have money for states that have bankrupted themselves for a variety of reasons. And if you look at the SEIU, if you look at the employee unions, they all are going to suffer massive layoffs if the states don't get money. So the states must get money. I think that the Republicans ought to insist on, number one, the highest principle, save free enterprise. And that means tort reform. That means to preempt all the state common law on tort, to remove it all to one district, and to make it almost impossible to sue anyone for virus. And number two, they've got to beef up our national defense in the Pacific. I mean, billions of dollars of submarines and cyber defense and B-21s. I mean, they ought to shovel everything on there, because those are the two things we need to save the Constitution, are the free enterprise that makes it happen and the national defense that protects the free enterprise.
No, I think that's right. I think those are the grounds for a compromise. I think the real question here will be the extent to which the Democratic Party can come to that table, or they're increasingly pulled by a radicalized wing of their party, which does not want to have those kinds of deals and wants to push further and further in the direction towards confrontation with an administration which they consider to be illegitimate. I mean, I think all the other things we're seeing right now concerning the rule of law and Flynn and the judge, I think all these things in a very broad sense are connected as parts of this debate and discussion we're having right now about the nature and the future of the American regime.
They very much are. In the lead up to this, I spoke directly. I don't know if he listens. Many federal judges do, and they tell me they do. Directly to Judge Sullivan. He is endangering the rule of law. He is actually breaching not just the relationship between Article 3 and Article 2, but the due process rights upon which you, Matt Spalding, and I, Hugh Hewitt, and everybody listening to this show depend, whether they know it or not, like the oxygen which we breathe. It goes back to the Magna Carta, that you are not going to be judge, jury, and prosecutor in one person. And Judge Sullivan has set himself up as a tyrant.
No, look, there are. I was trying to determine, thinking through what are the different levels of what is going on here, and there are these deep violations of the rule of law. You already touched on a couple of them. One is due process, the process to which we're due. It's a legal process. The FBI not following their own procedures, putting someone in a perjury trap. But then you have another layer, which is the separation of powers, the level of the Constitution, which right now we're seeing a conflict with Judge Sullivan, in which a judge is challenging directly the clear constitutional power of the executive to prosecute. But then beyond that, there are, I think, significant questions here about regime principles having to do with the peaceful transition of power from one administration to another. But then even beyond that, I think there's a real challenge going on to constitutional orders simply on behalf of an administrative elite that really sees itself outside of the normal parameters of the rule of law.
Oh, that's the definition of tyranny. And I want, Media Matters listens to every hour of this show, and they're going to say, Hugh Hewitt called Judge Sullivan a tyrant, and they're going to use the cartoon version. I'm thinking, I've been listening to this book, Dynasty, by Tom Holland, about Tiberius Caesar, when he took down Sejanus in a very legal manner. But what he basically did was he ordered the prosecution of Sejanus and the verdict before it came through. It was a complete rule of one, as a monarch or its corrupt version tyrant would do. And that's what we set up the Republic to prevent, Matt Spalding.
No, that's right. I mean, the part of the scandal here is the extent to which we're seeing the weaponization of legal process. The great gem of Western civilization and the rule of law coming through English Constitution to the American Constitution. This idea of the rule of law, that it's the rule of law, not the rule of men. That's being challenged here. It's being undermined in a very clear, practical way. But in its place, which is what I really worry about, is a certain weaponization of that process. It's using the guise of a legal process to achieve political ends that could not be achieved at the ballot box. That's the real, regime question being put to us, which is the same regime question, I would note, that Abraham Lincoln brought up in 1861. Can you replace a decision at the ballot box with something else? Then it was being replaced with bullets. Today, I think it's being replaced with a certain weaponization of the legal process, and that is deeply disturbing because it attacks directly at the regime.
Matt Spalding is my guest, Dean of the Hillsdale Graduate School in D.C. I very rarely use the term constitutional crisis. I scoff at, I mock people who do. Because the Constitution is very, very strong. I have never worried about it for a second. But I believe we are on the precipice of a constitutional crisis with the unmasking scandal and Judge Sullivan's rejection of the rule of law. We'll talk more with Dean Spalding after the break. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree Summer Camps. Click on the banner at hughhewitt.com.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Dean Matthew Spalding of Hillsdale in D.C. The Van Andel Graduate School is with us. Dean, tell me, are applications open for the next gathering? I would assume you guys will be back in the fall, socially distanced with your masks, but I'm assuming you're going to be going.
No, we are. We're in the applications right now until like June 15th. We've actually just started our summer session, so we're teaching right now. We're doing it over Zoom, but we will get back in the classroom the moment we can.
All right. So when you come to talk to them about, I want to talk in order, and it may take us a little bit. The first big constitutional issue is the Obamagate, which I have defined, and I would like your reflection on my definition of Obamagate as the intentional interference with the peaceful, seamless cooperation transition of power, which has been the glory of the Republic with one exception, 1861, and possibly the election deadlock of 1876. But other than that, it has been the seamless transition of power has been the glory of the Republic. I believe this unmasking scandal is about that. What do you think, Dean Spalding?
I think you're right. Let me parse a couple of terms here. I resist the phrase. I know it's a good phrase, Obamagate, because on the one hand, as with many of the words we use, like the word scandal or crisis, we've diminished their meaning. I mean, a scandal is merely something that shocks us. This is something deeper, and this is not like Whitewatergate or Billygate or whatever it might be. This, and your description, your definition is spot on. This is a much more serious thing. Let's put it into the, you mentioned especially 1861. This is the one time this has never truly happened, but think about when it did happen and why it was important. And that's the election of 1800. The first time in history, where one party turned over peaceably the reins of power to another political party, to its actual critics. That's a radical thing. Prior to that, and this is why this is the glory of the Western system, prior to that, the way popular attitudes were shown in politics, whereby overthrowing the government, chopping off their head, and using some sort of violent force, finding some other means to prevent that action from that event from happening or overthrowing a government. What the American constitutional system does is it creates an alternative way to do that. And in 1800, even though Jefferson thought it was a revolution, as did Hamilton, as did John Marshall, they did not prevent him from taking power and exercising constitutional power as President of the United States.
When Adams was defeated and Jefferson won. When Adams was defeated and Jefferson won, they thought that was a break, but no one said not happening.
Correct. That's right. And Jefferson never had that in mind. Hamilton, his critics never had that in mind. Marshall, Adams put Marshall in the Supreme Court as they went about fighting these constitutional battles within the constitutional system, within the rule of law. But that is so historically significant that event set the precedent. But we have to remember the reason why this is a gem. It's not merely a nice thing that happens. It's not merely a tradition we have. It's because free elections express the sovereignty of the people, and the sovereignty of the people, their consent is what makes government legitimate in the first place, which is to say to reverse that is to attack the very legitimacy of constitutional government. That's why all these activities are not merely questioning due process. They're not merely subverting the rule of law. If they are indeed questioning an election, they are actually subverting and attacking constitutional government itself. That's why this is not merely a scandal or merely a crisis. This is a regime question we are at.
Matthew Spalding is 100% correct. I talk about the transition as the glory of the Republic, and I am not overstating that. It had never existed anywhere before us. We're the longest living peaceful transition of power government. I mean, the glorious revolution of 1688, the decapitation of Charles. I mean, the English had their problem. We've never had that as a republic. We're the only ones. And when people screw around with that, like President Obama's team did, well, we're going to pay attention to it on the Hillsdale Dialogue. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. We never really thought, we fans of the Federalist Papers, that a Broadway hit would involve the Federalist Papers. Dean Matthew Spalding and I were talking earlier about Hamilton, but we should turn to these Federalist Papers to understand the crisis that we are in right now. And Dean Spalding, I want to just list 7 things, and I want to try and get through them in the next segment. First, there was a counterintelligence investigation launched against a presidential election. Second, at the conclusion of that, which had borne no fruit because there was no collusion, there was an end run by the FBI, the police, around the attorney general who did not want them to interview Flynn, but they did it anyway. Then there was a leak of classified information. Then there was the prosecution of General Flynn that was predicated on the non-disclosure of exculpatory information. Then there is Judge Sullivan declaring him treasonous. He walks that back, but it tells you state of mind. Then there is Judge Sullivan opening up a window for everyone who has an opinion on a private person's guilt, which they cannot possibly know, or judge, to send in their opinions. Then Judge Sullivan appoints a counsel to represent the prosecutors who are standing in front of them, and then the media doesn't cover the story. This is an appalling sequence of events that actually would never have occurred to me, even in a 7 Days of May, off the charts, over the top thriller.
No, I think you're right. I think any one of these, virtually, should bother us as a nation in which the rule of law and due process is important. We are seeing numerous cases in which an individual or a president or we're seeing this due process being violated. There's procedural things are happening that are not according to established procedures. When you put it all together, however, when you look at that narrative and you see the movement, to which we can add numerous other things that are to be added to what you had here, that's when I think you see something different going on here. And at one time, looking at this, or in one individual piece of it, you might think, well, these are merely bad actors, maybe a rogue individual who's kind of off the radar here. But there's a pattern here that I think whether you're liberal or conservative, Democrat or Republican, that's the kind of thing we should be looking at, because if that pattern suggests an intention, that's something that should be chilling. That's something the ACLU should be on top of, because not only does it violate our liberties, but in violating those liberties, it really undermines the whole constitutional system, which is meant to uphold those liberties. That's what I find to be so disturbing about this. It's on the one hand, it is those particular violations. A judge who is in Article 3 cannot instigate or force the prosecution of anyone. That's an Article 2 power. That distinction is crucial within the separation of powers, and that separation of powers between the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary is key to the structural constitution. That's very disturbing. However, if you put all these things together and look at the steps and look at the way in which it seems that having failed to do this, they went on to this, and they went on to this, and they went on to this. That's the kind of thing that makes me, as a broad observer from the outside, very nervous here, and suggests there was an intention by certain parties at the highest level of government, very elite levels of law enforcement, those who are sworn to uphold the Constitution and the rule of law, including political actors, in which the legal process and the political process have combined, have come together in a way to change the outcome of an election. That a judge, perhaps not intentionally, probably not intentionally, but is somehow involved in playing this game in which the legal process becomes a mechanism for achieving political outcomes, that, on top of everything else, is extremely disturbing.
Let's talk for a moment about the best possible interpretation, because let's give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Liz Cheney, the chairman of the Republican conference and the rising star in the House, daughter of Vice President Cheney, very well-known former State Department official, said this week on this show that James Comey is the baddest actor, the worst actor in the Beltway over the last decade, and that he's been doing bad things for a long time. Let's assume for a moment that Jim Comey had the best of intentions. Let's assume for a moment that Andrew McCabe had the best of intentions, that everybody at the National Security Council had the best of intentions. They really believed that Michael Flynn was a Russian agent. Let's just believe that for a moment. Not the lower intention is that they knew what they were doing. They were subverting the administration. They were trying to set up their return to power in 4 years, cripple the administration, make them lose the 2018 election. That's the basis movement. And even money. Who knows? That's even baser. Better book deal, better sources, all sorts of different things. But let's give them a high motive. It would still be outrageous, Matt. That's what I want people to understand. There is, even if you give to them the highest order of good intentions, it's still outrageous.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, this is why I think this is a regime question. I don't think it can be merely written off to bad actors. As much as we know and dislike about Director Comey or former Director Comey, he does not strike me as an unintelligent individual who doesn't know what he's doing, nor merely someone who is merely acting for very low and base purposes. The claim here all along was that all of this was being done for some high purpose, having to do with a national security question, dealing with Russia. This individual was a Russian agent. It's a question of national security. But having said that, if that was true and was their motivation, which seems to be that it was, to withhold that information in a moment of transition from one executive to another executive and not tell them meant that they were not informing an incoming president and someone who was president when they were still withholding information. They were withholding information from the constitutionally elected executive. That's what disturbs me, in the sense that the FBI, the intelligence agencies, they're withholding this information. They saw themselves and their actions above the rule of law. They did not see themselves as having an obligation to those to whom they report, including the Attorney General. We always remind people the FBI is created by legislation within the Department of Justice, and yet they went around the Department of Justice, and Comey chose not to inform the President of the United States. That is a problem.
Oh, it's a huge problem. So let's go for a moment to a guy I really respect, Ward Carroll. I mean, I really like this fellow. He's a great patriot, flew in the defense of his country at the United States Naval Institute, has just tweeted out, so the same Republicans who claim President Trump's delay in dealing with coronavirus was due to a focus on impeachment have now introduced Obamagate, another thing to take Trump's focus away from coronavirus. I don't think Ward and very fine people quite understand the gravity with which we are viewing this. And they are not con law experts, right? They're political observers and they're good pundits, and I certainly can't fly a plane like Ward Carroll can. But I've spent 25 years teaching the Constitution. This is exactly the greatest danger to it. People have got to understand this is the undermining of the rule of law. And that doesn't have once you cross that bank, the river overflows it, you've got nothing.
Well, you got to think about what's the precedent you are setting. I mean, think about future presidents, not just the Trump administration at some point transitioning to somebody else, but beyond that. The question here is always, what is the precedent you are setting for the future? And this is extremely disturbing. I mean, and I think one of the reasons why a lot of people aren't seeing this is they have a low opinion of politics. They assume this is all merely politics prior to an election. This is merely back and forth. and so they've shunted. They're not hearing this, but this should be disturbing for on the left, on the right, Democrats, Republicans, actually anybody who is a friend of free government. The idea that one set of elected individuals could work with other individuals within the administrative bureaucracy who are sworn to uphold the rule of law, that they can work together to shape an outcome different from that which is results from the ballot box. That is an extremely dangerous thing that actually goes back to that's not progress, that's regress, that's undermining the whole idea of constitutional government in a way that we should all be disturbed about.
And this is where I tell my friends in the center, people who are never Trumpers, you take a lick and you keep on ticking, to use the old John Cameron Swayze. You lose elections sometimes. I was so bitterly disappointed in 1992 because George H.W. Bush was a fine man. I mean, just a great man, and he was managing the crisis of our era. And had he stayed in government, I do not believe Russia would be ruled by Putin the way it is today. I just don't think Bill Clinton was up. I mean, the whole peace dividend, the whole nightmare. But we lost. And I was driving down after election night from L.A. home. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning. Very sad because we'd lost. But I always tell myself, you lose about 50% of the elections in this country. Right, Matt? You can't expect to always win.
But the flip side is also the case in this particular instance. You're dealing with somebody, take various of our friends, which I have many, they don't like this current president. And their attitude is, it's okay because it's Trump. That's not the point. It's defending the office. It's defending the Constitution and the structure and the institutions itself. If you can do this with Trump and you think that's okay, then you can do this against any president, and any opposition party can do this against any incoming president. And at that point, you've lost the rule of law, because the rule of law in the Constitution is designed to prevent the use of force to bring about outcome.
And I would add, and we'll come back to, I would add, and if a defendant can be treated the way Judge Sullivan is treating Michael Flynn, any defendant in any court, federal, state, local municipality, any defendant can be treated that way. He is every defendant, and people have to understand that. I'll be right back with Dean Matt Spalding. Don't go anywhere, America, except to, of course, ReliefFactor.com. As soon as the radio week is done, after one more segment, on go the gym shorts, out go the trundler. I'll go find a nice flat path and get at least an hour in, maybe two. I don't know what the weather is today. I haven't looked yet. I told the fetching Mrs. Hewitt, who's away for the day, that she's coming back to a completely blanketed with rain, gloomy week in the Beltway. But we will get out there. You put on your slickers and you go out. Slickers is a Midwestern term for it's raining outside. And take your ReliefFactor.com. $19.95. Get you a starter pack. Go and get it right now. Come back for the last segment with Matt Spalding here on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Dean Matt Spalding is my guest from Hillsdale's Van Andale Graduate School in Washington, D.C. We're talking about the constitutional moment we're in. I want to close by telling you about courage and cowardice, Matt. When people take up arms against the king, they are risking lives, and many of them, as that musical demonstrated, lost their lives doing that. And there wasn't a coward among them. There were some traitors, but there weren't any cowards. Whoever leaked this unmasked intelligence from General Flynn, or whoever orchestrated the vast unmasking in order to hide their leaking, is a coward, because they oppose Trump, but they will not do so openly. And so I think that that's an important observation, that this kind of subversion of the rule of law is often accompanied by a character defect so vast it's easy to overlook, because it's like a glacier of cowardice.
That's a great point, and I think you're absolutely right. But also consider the extent to which that character flaw you've observed, that cowardice, also goes hand in hand with the very notion of operating outside of the rule of law. That is, these things are part and parcel of the other. And there's a certain authoritarian edge to this as well. That is, there's an enforcement mechanism here. That is, the way the courageous way to do this, I think the way the founders intended it, by establishing the successful transition of governments. The way Lincoln spoke of it in 1861, which is the only thing you can replace, if you disagree, you can't replace ballots with bullets. You can only replace it with ballots themselves at succeeding elections. Right? That's the courageous way to do it in the context of constitutional government, is actually through the process of constitutional government. The weak and the cowardly way to do it is to try to find other ways to do it, through the dark corners and subverting things and leaking things. That distinction is historically the way it's occurred many times in the past.
There is a very honorable way, by the way, to do the opposite, which is what Martin Luther King did in the Birmingham jail. It's what
That's
protesters
right,
have done forever, which is to disobey the law and accept the consequences, thereby to illustrate the injustice. But we see no coward stepping forward to say, I gave it to David Ignatius, it was me, try me. No one has done that. They're all cowards.
Well, the fact that there were so many requests to unmask that name in a very short period of time suggests to me that there was either a lot of interest, or they wanted to make so much confusion that we could never figure this out.
It's the latter. There's a spider.
Back to some sort of collusion here on their part. But again, that's really part and parcel of going outside of the whole mechanism. Here's an example of courage. Speaking historically, what we didn't know about the election of 1800 is the election of 1800 went into the House, and Jefferson and Burr were tied. And there had to be a decision about who was going to be the president, and Hamilton, Jefferson's arch enemy at that point, openly sided with Jefferson because he trusted his character despite massive political disagreements. There's an example of your opposite.
That's interesting. It's something to reflect on, because it is the opposite of the sniveling little coward who shot somebody in the back. I mean, it's just, there is a spider's web of deceit here, and it's just inimical to free government. And the never-Trumpers are so blinded by their hatred. I do not suggest that every never-Trumper is involved in it, but they are blind to it because they hate Trump so much. Last word to you, Matt Spalding.
No, I think that's right, but I think the question will be whether the American people, and it's their legitimacy that's being questioned here, will have a reaction to get this. Here's another historical parallel to think about. Andrew Jackson, who I don't completely support in all cases, but in some cases very much do, to see what he is representing, that populist move. He's elected in 1828 overwhelmingly because in 1824 there was a perception of this so-called corrupt bargain between Quincy Adams and Henry Clay, which pales in comparison till today. That was merely a political deal. The question will be whether the American people see this for what it is that potentially could have great political effect in starting a realigning, a rethinking of this country about the nature of how we govern ourselves, what its legitimate source of legitimacy is, against, I think, this deeper elite opinion, which seems to be wanting to act outside of the rule of law in order to circumvent their legitimacy and their free elections.
And
That,
to
I think,
keep
is
their
what-
power, to keep their privilege. It is so obviously a power play. Matt Spalding, Dean of the Van Andel Graduate School of Hillsdale College in the heart of Washington, D.C. Follow him on Twitter at Hillsdale in D.C. Enjoy. You can still get your application in for the fall. It is a graduate program unlike any other in statesmanship at Hillsdale in D.C. Thank you, Dean Spalding. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. Thank you, Mrs. Generalissimo. Great news on the cancer scan for Dwayne this week. So we have things to be thankful for. Remember our friends at Angel Tree. Remember those kids whose mom or dad are in prison, and go to HughHewitt.com and contribute to the Angel Tree Camping Fellowship. Thank you all.